Today on Hebrew Grammar Help, finally, Numbers Part 3, the traditional numbers. Welcome back to Hebrew Grammar Help. I'm Sapir, and today I am finally finishing up my little mini-series on numbers with Part 3, the traditional Hebrew numbers. And so this is a video on the traditional system of using the letters of the alef-bet to denote numbers. And this system seems to have been developed in the last couple of centuries before the Common Era. So let's get started. So of course the numbers that we all know and love, the ones that we use on a daily basis, are the Arabic numerals. We call them the Arabic numerals, but apparently this whole system actually developed in India. Traditional Hebrew numbers work a lot more like Roman numerals in that they don't have a zero, and also the position of the number doesn't determine its value. The traditional Hebrew system is much less complicated because it's all about adding. There's no subtracting. But it's a little less versatile because the biggest number is 400. In modern times, these numbers have pretty limited uses. We do still see them in the Tanakh. If we're reading the Tanakh in Hebrew, we use them for the chapter numbers. And they're also used for calendar dates with regard to the Hebrew calendar, the traditional calendar. We never use them when we're talking about the Gregorian calendar. And so you might actually see them on actual calendars, but you might also see them on gravestones of Jewish people. And these will be used to denote the date within the year, the date of the month, and also the year that somebody passed away. And you also see them on ketubot, the marriage contracts, and maybe other kind of traditional religious-y type documents. So here we have 3 holidays of the Hebrew calendar. We have Tu B'Shvat, Tu B'Av, and Lag BaOmer. Shvat is a month of the Hebrew calendar, and Tet Vav is a number that corresponds to the number 15. And so Tu B'Shvat literally means the 15th of Shvat. So Tet Vav is how we would write 15 in the traditional numbers, but it also looks like a word that would sound like tu. So that's why we say Tu B'Shvat instead of something like Chamisha Asar B'Shvat. It's just probably faster. And then, like I said, we also have Tu B'Av. Av is a different month, and so this is the 15th of Av. And this is the day for lovers in the Hebrew calendar. So it's kind of like Valentine's Day, but it's not in February, it is in summer. So this year, it just passed, it was on August 8th. And Lag BaOmer is a holiday that the name of it literally means the 33rd day of the counting. And so Lamed means 30 and Gimel means 3, and so they just kind of put a generic vowel in between, an A vowel, so that's how we get Lag, and then BaOmer means of the counting. But so what are we counting? Well, we are counting the days between Pesach, Passover holiday, and Shavuot, the Feast of Weeks. And there are exactly 7 weeks between Pesach and Shavuot. And so every day they say, okay, this is the whatever day of the counting. It's traditional to count them out loud every single day in between. And so I grew up in a very secular home, so I actually never have celebrated Lag BaOmer. And so I'm sure you could actually learn a lot more about it from Wikipedia. One thing I do know is that the celebrations always involve some kind of fire. And again, I don't know why. All right, I digress. Let's get back to these traditional numbers and what letters correspond to what. So the first thing to know is that just like with the Roman system, there is no zero. We are using these numbers basically to count stuff, and so we don't count zeros. Zero is not a counting number. So we start with aleph, and aleph means one, and then we just go up until we arrive at tet, which means 9. So we go up by ones from aleph through tet. So aleph is 1, bet is 2, gimel is 3, and so on until we get to tet, which is 9. And then the next 9 letters refer to the tens. So we've got yud means 10, and then kaf, the very next letter, means 20, and then lamed means 30, mem means 40, and so on. All the way up to tzadi, which means 90. And then the last 4 letters refer to the numbers 100, 200, 300, and 400. And so that's what all of these letters mean if you just see them sitting there on their own, probably with a little geresh, with a little apostrophe. And that's what each of these numbers refers to. But of course, numbers aren't usually so neat and tidy like that. We have compound numbers just like we do in our modern system. And so basically with a compound number, you just always put the larger number first and then the next number, and then you add them up. So for example, here are the teen numbers, and most of them start with a yud, which means 10, and then you just add the single digit letter that corresponds to whatever should be in the ones place. So yod aleph means 11, yod bet means 12, yod gimel means 13, and so on. But look what happens here with 15 and 16. Instead of adding a yod and a hey, which would be like a 10 and a 5 for 15, or a yod and a vav for 16, which would be like a 10 and a 6. Instead, we use the tet, and which is 9, and then we go up 1 on the ones digit, right? So we say tet vav, which is literally 9 and 6 for 15, and then tet zayin, which is 9 and 7 for 16. So why would we do that? Well, the answer is that yod and hey together and yod and vav together are very close to the name of Hashem. And we are very, very particular when we write a name like that. We do not like to write the name of the Lord ever in anywhere that it might possibly get destroyed or thrown out or disposed of in an improper manner. And so we're very careful about not writing that. And so basically a number that's so close to that name, we're not going to write it that way. That's why instead we just get around it by, instead of saying 10 plus 5, we say 9 plus 6. It adds up the same. And of course, I'm saying these numbers, yod aleph, yod bet. I'm just talking about the way we write them. If you came across this number written like this in letters, you would still just say the number as it was. 11, 12, whatever the number actually is. Except, like I said, when we're talking about those 3 holidays, Tu B'Shvat, Tu B'Av, and Lag BaOmer. Now, I'm writing all of these numbers in my graphics just with their letters. I'm not putting any punctuation. And in fact, in my Tanakh, that's how it shows up. It's only used for the chapter numbers, and we can see that there's no punctuation here. It's just the however many letters we need to use to make the number, and they don't put any punctuation. The purpose of punctuation is to make sure that the reader knows that this is a number and not some kind of a word that they're trying to pronounce as a word. You can see on this page from the Tanakh that this number is written bigger. It's kind of all, it's really obvious that it's not a part of the whatever story is being written. It's not supposed to be a word. It's clearly a number. And so the JPS did not feel the need to put any punctuation to indicate that it's a number. But on gravestones and elsewhere, you do often see some kind of punctuation. Usually it's in the form of gershaim, the double quote marks between the second to last and the last letter. I'm going to show some examples from gravestones in a moment, but I also want to talk about the answer to the question, what happens if we have a number that is larger than 400? Because that's our biggest number there. Well, to look at the answer, we have to think of what is the purpose for writing a number. When we see a number written in the Tanakh or on a document like a ketubah, generally the actual words for the numbers are written out. So for example, here's a page from Exodus. So this is the JPS English Hebrew Tanakh, and you can see that we've got Hebrew on the right side, English on the left. And so I highlighted 3 places on this one little page that have numbers. I didn't even highlight all of the numbers. But you can see that on the English side, it says 603,550 men. And so they actually just wrote the number, they wrote it in Arabic numerals, 603,550, right? But on the Hebrew side, it says, ל-600,000 ו-3,550. And that is writing out the words that I'm actually saying. They're not using this numerical system in the Tanakh. And I didn't see it anywhere. Same thing with 1,775 shekels, or it's like the 1,775 shekels. In Hebrew it says ha-elef ushva ha-me'ot ve-chamisha ve-shiv'im. So in the Tanakh, they're just writing out the whole word that means the number. So this is from my ketubah when I got married. And so it starts out be'echad b'shabbat, which means on the first day of the week. The rest of it says be'arba'a ve'esrim yom lechodesh elul shnat 5,763 ושלוש. And so that literally means on the 24th day of the month of Elul, the year of 5,763. So it's all written out. It's not using this system. And I think, we're talking about really big numbers here. And of course, we want to make sure that it's clear what day everything happened on. All right, so let's look at some gravestones. So first of all of these photos are pictures of gravestones of my family members. And we're first going to look at the dates, the date of the month. And so these, of course, are always smaller numbers. They're never any bigger than 28 or possibly 29. Of course, the Hebrew months all go by the phases of the moon, so they don't have 30 days in any Hebrew month. So first we're looking at single letter numbers. So these are all numbers that can be depicted by a single letter in the Hebrew traditional system. And all of these just have a single geresh, a geresh is like an apostrophe. And so they all just have a single geresh right after them, right? If you remember, I said before that that numbers often will have a double geresh, a gershayim, in between the second to last and the last letters of a number. But of course, if there is only one letter, then where are you going to put it? So instead, they put a single geresh right after the letter, just to indicate that that this is a number. So, and notice that here we have kaf as a single letter number, and so it just has the single geresh after it. But in the modern system, this would take two numbers to write, right? Kaf means 20. So in the modern system, we would need a 2 and a 0. But in the traditional Hebrew system, it only takes one letter, which is kaf. And so when the number takes more than one letter to write it, the typical way to write this is with the gershayim in between the second to last and the last digits. And gershayim they're like a quote mark. They can look like a yud in some fonts, but the gershayim is often a little bit higher than the top of the letters, and it is sometimes a little bit slanted. So the big question is, how do we write numbers bigger than 400? Because I mean, we got to the end of the alef-bet. What are we going to do? As I mentioned, typically when it's super important that we know exactly what the number is, it just gets written out. The words get written out. But on gravestones, there's not a lot of room, so they don't want to do that. They want to write it using this system. But here we are in 2025. The Hebrew year is 5785. So we've got a 5,000 and we've got a 700, and both of those numbers don't seem to exist in this system. So the first thing to know is that we just don't write the 5,000. We just write the hundreds, the tens, and the ones on the gravestones. And I've been asked, well, how do we distinguish 5,000 something from 4,000 something? And that is an excellent question, and I have absolutely no idea. All right, so like I said, the letters only go up. Taf is the last letter of the alef-bet, and it means 400. So what if we're trying to say 500 or 600, 7, 8, 900? There is a system whereby some people use the final letters, the Sofit letters. There are 5 Sofit letters in the Hebrew alef-bet, and there are 5 missing hundreds. And so basically they just use the Sofit letters in the order that they're in the alef-bet to denote the next 5 hundreds. So here you can see Chaf Sofit is 500, Mem Sofit is 600, Nun Sofit is 700, Fe Sofit is 800, and Sadi Sofit is 900. But not everyone subscribes to this idea that the Sofit letters have their own numerical value. And it is not, I've never actually seen something like this on a gravestone. All of my family members' gravestones, the year of death is either 5,600 and something or 5,700 and something. So I can look at my family's gravestones and get an answer of what is the typical way to engrave the date on these gravestones. And what they do is they simply put the taf, which means 400, and then they put the next number for the next 100. So like taf kof would be 400 plus 100, and that would be 500. Taf resh is 400 plus 200, so that's 600. And Taf Shin is 400 plus 300, so 700. Now, we haven't gotten to 800 or 900 in this millennium, and so I don't know what's going to happen. I imagine that 800 would probably be tough, and that 900 would be like tough kof. But to be honest, I'm not sure until I see it happen. So let's look at this gravestone. This is a husband and wife. And so they're sharing a gravestone. And so the husband passed in February of 1928. And we see that year right here. The year starts with Taf, which is 400, and then Resh, which is 200. And so we add them together and we get 600. And then Pei is 80 and Chet is 8. So we add them all together, we get 688, and then we add the understood 5,000, and so we know that they passed in the year 5,688, according to the Hebrew calendar. The wife passed in November of 1945, and so her year is Taf Shin Vav, which is 400 plus 300 plus 6, which is 706, and then we add the 5,000, so it's her death year is 5,706 according to the Hebrew calendar. Now, one last big way that I didn't really mention at the beginning of that we use this system of numbers is called gematria. And you've probably heard of it. I know that people are also trying to do it with English words as well. But it's this system using this Hebrew numbering system and finding connections between these words. This is super ancient, before English was even a language. So it's basically just a process of finding connections between words or phrases that add up, that their numerical values add up to the same to the same sum. So some Jews believe in this more than others. Linguists don't see any value in this at all. But there are a lot of Jewish people who take this very seriously, and they study these connections between words and phrases. And they will sometimes even offer different interpretations of verses in the Tanakh based on these numerical values. So it is something that is very prevalent certainly in some Jewish communities, not so much in any that I have ever been involved with. I do find it interesting, though. It seems like it is a really cool concept, and I would like to know more about it, but there's just no time in my life right now to delve deeper into it. But it is very interesting. So that's it for today. Now you know what the traditional counting system in Hebrew is like. It's really not that difficult. It just has some pretty limited uses since the numbers only go up to 400, and I've shown a couple of different ways that they can get up to basically 999, but then once you get the thousands in there, it's really going to be difficult. As always, if you have any questions or feedback, please leave them in the comments. And especially if you have any aspect of Hebrew grammar that has you flummoxed, leave that in the comments and I will do my best to make a video. Hit like if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe and press the notification bell if you want to see more. Lehitraot Papa Ama Ba'a. See you next time.